Okay, how about now?
Right now it's just participants.
Okay. How about now?
It says you started screen sharing, but I don't see anything other than black yet. Oh, there we go.
All right, cool. Okay, so you can see the top here, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I sent a document, or I put a document in the drive over the weekend that said it was called a information sheet. I think it was a seller information sheet. Did y'all see that? Let me pull it up real fast. What I used to do, it's called template for seller information sheet.
Yes, that's this. Yeah, I have that.
Can y'all see that?
No.
Mm-mm.
All right, hang on. Boy, this technology stuff is fun, isn't it? All right, cancel. I got too many windows open. Spreadsheet. Damn it, hang on. Sorry, guys.
You got this when I returned your computer today, didn't you?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, how about now? You guys see this?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so it's basically one file, and on this side, this area right here, where it's the buyer template for seller info sheet, that would be one tab at the bottom, and then the next tab would be the checklist, and it would either be the buyer checklist or the seller checklist based on whether the client was a buyer or seller. Okay, and this is essentially a document that would be shared by myself and my assistant that would be a quick reference for all the pertinent details of the file and where are we on the checklist of the process of the transaction, right? So let's just spend 2 seconds going over what this is all about, okay? You would tweak this slightly if it was a buyer, okay? Because you wouldn't have, for example, a shackle code or a CBS code, right? Because that has to do with having the lockbox and the listing. But for the most part, most of this information would be relevant, okay? When they get a property, or some of this stuff up here wouldn't be so relevant other than the buyer's contact information, okay? Once you get the property under contract, you can write down the FMLS number, the Georgia MLS number, right? Some of this stuff is for sellers, so you tweak it slightly for the buyer, right? Who is the other agent's information? How do I reach them? What brokerage are they with? What are their codes? So it's easy to fill out the amendments and that kind of thing. Purchase price, closing costs, earnest money amount, who's it held by, what type of loan, is there a home warranty? Are there any other notes that I need to be aware of? An example of a note would be, my client has to furnish receipts 5 days prior to closing, something like that for a repair. Or we need to turn in the HOA docs by a certain date, something like that, right? Here's information on the other agent. Here's information on the lender. Here's information on the closing attorney. And then here's some details that keep amendments really easy. What was the offer date, the binding agreement date, the earnest money deadline, due diligence period ends on that day, financing ends on this day, appraisal ends on this day. Is there a home contingency sale? When does that expire? Closing and possession. So this is essentially the hot facts of the transaction. Now you see if you look down here, it says info sheet, and then the next block says checklist. That's ultimately where you would paste this adjusted checklist over here if it was a buyer or seller. Does everyone follow that? So we got two things at play here. Number one is the info sheet. And I'm just showing you what I did. You know, if you have a better system of tracking this stuff, more power to you. This is just something that helped me and kept me organized, and primarily kept my assistant organized, right? So every day she would know which files were active, which files she needs to have an eye on, right? And then she would basically cut and paste. If we just finished the lender introduction, she would then go down and paste the next 3 things that needed to be done. And that's what we would talk about every morning. She says, okay, on the Jones file, these are the next things we're going to do. And then I would say, okay, you do that, I'll do this, send that to this person. That would be done, right? Then we go, okay, the Stevens file, okay, these are the next 3 things that need to be done. You do that, I'll do this, send this, right? Okay, the Smith file, okay, I need you to send that, I need you to do that, whatever. Okay, the other Jones file, okay, we don't need to do anything with that file today, right? And that would be our morning check-in, because we all knew what deadlines were approaching. We all knew what emails had to be sent and what emails we were on the lookout for, what contracts need to be signed, all that kind of stuff. See what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Because right now you might have 1 or 2 files, but soon enough you're gonna have a lot of files and you're gonna have to keep it all straight, right? And that way I could, and by the way, I had all this on my Google Drive. So at any time somebody called me and said, hey, what's the CBS code for 123 Smith Street? And I just pull it up right then and there, right? I didn't have to be like, well, I'll go back to my office and check my file. It was right there, right? Okay, so let's go back to the checklist for a second. I'm just gonna go back to the other screen. Can you guys see this now? You see the checklist?
Yes.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about, okay, so Heather, it says fill out buyer info sheet. That now you basically have that. You can
Right.
see it for a buyer, okay? And I'll explain what some of these other questions are. Let me just, okay, cool. So we will go through this checklist, and this will kind of explain to you what happens behind the scenes as we're working a file. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Would this be helpful for everyone? Okay. All right,
Yeah.
cool. There's, in the Google Drive, there's 2 documents. One is called a seller intake sheet and one is called a buyer intake sheet, okay? That is a combination of intake sheet / qualifying questions, okay? So I always had a stack of the buyer sheets and the seller sheets next to me when I was prospecting, right? So if I'm in the course of a conversation with somebody and now all of a sudden we're getting into the part of the talk where we're, you know, where it's time for me to be the agent and it's time for them to answer the questions, right? Then I'd say, ooh, I might get paid. Let me pull out the intake sheet, right? And the intake sheet would basically be like, I won't pull it up right now so we can go through this quickly, but it's like name, email, cell phone, address, when they want to move, why they want to move, what they're looking for, what's important to them, have they spoken to a lender, you know, all that kind of stuff. So the intake sheet also right then and there has the questions you should be asking them, okay? Same thing with the seller. The pre-qualification questions for a seller are things like, you know, why are you wanting to move? When do you need to be there by? Have you thought about selling the home yourself? What's the price that you wouldn't sell the home below? What's important to you about working with a real estate agent? Why is that important to you? Well, why is that important to you? Et cetera, et cetera. So as you're intaking them, it's kind of like when you go to a new doctor and they're like, here, fill out the paperwork. Same thing. Bless you. This is our paperwork, okay? But we're doing it oftentimes over the phone. So we got an intake sheet, and that is right next to us, so we can have a copy of that. If ultimately you want to do it while you're typing in command, that's fine. I never liked that. I wanted it on paper, and then I would take a picture of it and send it to my assistant, and poof, by the next day it would be in command. Make sense? So anytime I personally liked to jot all these things down while I was on the phone, and then I'd send a little picture and I'd send it to her, and boom, the next day it would be where it was supposed to be. Okay. Now, So I'd always have that. That's generally the first thing I'm doing when I'm starting a new relationship. Okay. Then I'd add the buyer to the database, right? More often than not, that step was not combined. So then I'd add the buyer to the database. By the way, everything that is in bold, let me just double check this. Yeah, everything that's bold is something my assistant would do. Everything that was not bold was something that I would do. The takeaway there is you are the assistant.
Yeah, I just don't
Okay.
know what it is.
You are a realtor from 8 to 8
pieces.
and a realtor's assistant from 8 until you can't keep your eyes open anymore. Until you make enough money to pay somebody to do the stuff you don't like doing. Because that's how businesses work, right? If you own a sandwich shop and you open the place, close the place, order all the bread, clean all the tables, make all the subs, refill all the containers of pickles, ring everybody up, there's only so many subs you can sell in one day. And the more subs that is, as you're reaching your capacity, the lousier your quality of life is. So this is, many of us are just getting started in our businesses. This is our opportunity to create the boundaries and the systems and structure to how we're going to preserve our quality of life while making good money. Make sense? Okay, so we're going to add the person to the database. Then we're going to book an appointment. Really, there should be an appointment set in there. Okay, then we're going to have a buyer seminar. We're going to talk about, I'm going to make my presentation, right? The presentation is going to be a needs analysis. It's going to be a review of the market. It's going to be some pointed questions. It's going to probably have some objection handlers in there. And then we're going to get paperwork signed. So buyer brokerage agreement is signed. So I would finish that call and I'd call my assistant or Skype her and say, all right, send over the buyer brokerage agreement. They're ready to sign it. And she'd know exactly what that is. She'd already have their email and their address because that was on the intake sheet, right? She already knew how to fill it out in .loop at the time, soon to be DocuSign. Right, so that would happen without me having to worry about it. Then we import the signed copy into Command. More than likely, it's already going to be in Command through DocuSign. Okay, I always had a duplicate copy of everything. So when we kept all of our files in .loop, every time there was a fully executed part of the contract that was stored within .loop, we downloaded it and put it into a Google Drive file. So at all times, I used to have a file that was like 2017 closed files, 2018 closed files, 2019 closed files, active listings, active buyers, something like that. And the sub file would be that particular Jones file, and all the executed agreements that were part of the Jones file would be easily be able to be found. So if somebody needed me to look something up or send something off, all I had to do was go to my Google Drive app and it was right there. Okay, so everything. This is, again, not a steadfast rule, but every single thing that you have in Command, I personally would have a backup. We had my assistant's in the Philippines, and there's all kinds of crazy weather in the Philippines. And she had an issue where like one of her hard drives went bad. So I mailed her a external hard drive. So every week she was taking all of our stuff and resaving it on her external hard drive. And I had an external hard drive. And so about every month I was doing the same thing. There was no files going to get lost. Okay. Between my computer, her external, my external, and the cloud, nothing was going anywhere. Okay. I was a little bit more paranoid back then. Okay. Again, create the Google Drive file for the client as backup to Command. Good job. Add to CTE. CTE is another system we had prior to Command. Probably not so relevant for you guys. It's a program called Commitment to Excellence. It is, I'm not sure if we're going to renew it as an office. I believe it's still available. It is freaking amazing. It's like you can cook dinner with Excel spreadsheets. It's the sickest thing you've ever seen. You think my little tracking sheet is cool? Oh my God, this thing is awesome. I'll chat with Aaron about it, see if I can get you guys a copy of it. Okay, set up an auto search. Right? Lender introduction. Okay. I either want to know their lender.
Bill, what was CTE called?
It's called
what is it?
Commitment to Excellence.
Thanks.
Okay, lender introduction. I either want to set them up with my lender or a lender that I have worked with, I can offer multiple names, or I want to know who their lender is. So if they're coming to me and they say, hey, I'm working with this guy who's a friend of a friend or whatever, and he works for Bank South, I'm going to call that guy and say, hey, it's Bill Linkwald. I understand we have a client in common. I just wanted to introduce myself, and this is how to reach me, and anytime you have any questions, you let me know, right? By the way, can you send me over a pre-approval letter for Mrs. Jones? By the way, can you send me over a loan worksheet for Mrs. Jones so I know what type of loan she's getting, what her down payment is, how much it's going to cost her monthly to get that mortgage, roughly speaking, what her closing cost estimates are. I want to know all that because right now there's no urgency. Once she identifies a property and she wants to write an offer and we got to do this and it's going to be hectic, right? So I want to get all this stuff down prior to it being hectic, okay? And I want to make sure that I might say to a new lender, I say, hey, in my experience, we typically see a 30 to 35 day closing. Is that okay with you? All right, we typically see a 21 to 25 day appraisal contingency, 21 to 25 day financing contingency. Excuse me, do you see any issue with that? Right? To which he will say, or she will say, no, that's no problem. Good, so now I know when I put that in the contract, it's not going to be a headache for everyone involved, right? I once had a buyer who had a lender relationship with somebody who literally said it was going to take 40 days to do an appraisal. So I called the buyer, I said, look, this ain't going to work. We're never going to find a property. This is way abnormal. And if you want to be protected with this lender, we're stuck. So we need a different lender. Or you need to know that you're not going to have an appraisal contingency, right? So to make sure that every partner in the transaction knows that you're in charge and that nothing's going to fall short when you're in charge, right? This is how to reach me. If you got any questions, I want you to let me know. Because from a somewhat selfish standpoint, now my time and my money's on the line, and I ain't messing around with that, right? So if you're going to be my partner, I need to know you're going to play ball. Because I want to work with A players. Make sense? Okay. Lender introduction. All right. Prep clipboard and printables for viewing. So I always used to, like, if you're going to go look at, let's say, 5 houses, I'd have the FMLS sheet, the tax report, and I'd know the history of the listing history of the property. So for example, I'd know when it was listed, when the price changed, etc. Because that might be something that we discuss in the course of a showing. Plus, that's like almost certainly the most common question a buyer asks, right? How long has this home been on the market? Has the price changed, right? I want to be able to answer those questions. So that's the material I would bring, right, for the showing. And I'd put it in order of the homes I was going to show. Then I would bring them a secondary copy of all of that so that they could have a copy, so they could write their own notes. And so when we met, I'd say, okay, here's your copy of the properties we're going to see today in order of the ones we're going to see. And when we went in and I was holding the sheet of paper and we were walking through the house and they're like, hey, Bill, floor plan's bad. This ain't the one. I'd literally be like, shh, get out. We're going home, right? Get back in the car. This ain't the one. No more wasting time here, right? And then we go find a different house. And sometimes that visual of like ripping it up even or folding it over. So like we're eliminating that. We're not buying this home. We're going to eliminate this from the mindset. Okay. First day out. So we're going to see the homes. Okay. By the way, this is yes or no. Did we do it? What date did we do it? And is there any notes that we need to be concerned about here? Okay. So we're going out to see homes. There's a lot of this like back and forth on the offer and sending more homes and getting them organized and printing out duplicates and all that until we submit an offer, binding agreement. I'd always send them a little video that said, hey, congratulations on going under contract on 123 Smith Street. It's really enjoyed our time together, and it's really an honor to work with you guys as you're buying your first house or as you're moving into this awesome school district. And I just wanted to let you know how gracious I am, or how appreciative I am of the opportunity to work together. Text it to them or email it to them, right? Again, I'm just trying to do something different. Green sheet and DocuSign. So this is probably a step you don't have to do anymore because the opportunities will automatically take the place of green sheets. It hasn't quite happened yet, but that's in process. Update the file in DocuSign or confirm updated file in DocuSign. So we want to make sure that all the executed contracts are where they need to be, properly labeled and all that. Same thing for your backup file. Then you're going to share the paperwork. LO is loan officer, attorney, and other agent, right? So you'd send a big email out to everyone saying, you know, here is the executed copy of 123 Smith Street, binding agreement dates, you know, March 20 or May 26, 2020, proposed closing date of June 26, 2020. If you need anything, please let me know. And now the attorney can start their process. The loan officer can start their process, okay? So as soon as humanly possible, after that deal is binding, you need to get the paperwork to the both attorney and lender, okay? Fill out custom buyer info sheet. So now we need to go back to this sheet that I just got done showing you and fill in the blanks a little bit now that we have some more information about the contract and about the property itself, okay? Again, and that'll be located, that'll be accessible for you quickly through Google Drive, okay? Then I would have a deadlines. There's a document called notice. I never use the GAR form. I didn't like it too much, but it's called Notice of Important Dates, I think. Notice of Important Dates, which basically says, you know, the deadline for this is this day, deadline for that is that day, deadline for this is this day. I'd usually just have a little calendar that when I sent the contract to the other agent, I'd say, according to my accounts, binding date is this, due diligence ends here, financing ends here, appraisal ends here, closing is this. Please let me know if your accounts are the same, right? So you put everyone on alert. Then we'd go and I don't know if I put this in here, but I'd have my assistant put all those deadlines into my calendar. Now, I don't want to know about an appraisal deadline the day it expires, because there's a lot to that, right? Especially if the appraisal is low. So every day we're basically looking at deadlines for like the next week to make sure that nothing's slipping through the cracks, because you're going to have somebody that just submitted an offer, somebody that's about to close, somebody that's about to do the amendment to address concerns. There's going to be a lot of moving parts, okay? So we want to make sure that we have fully executed contracts, properly organized, and dates and deadlines are identified for all the people that need to know, okay? We need to get email calendar of dates to the buyer, collect the earnest money, right? So either they gave it to you on the day that you looked at homes and they found one, or they dropped it by the office, whatever it may be. And then you need to send a copy of the receipt of the earnest money to the seller if that's part of the contract, which most likely it is, okay? Like it'll say like earnest money due within 3 days of binding agreement. So the buyer brings in the earnest money, you need to take a picture of that or make a copy of that, send it to the other agent and say, hey, we're in receipt of it. Just making sure you know that we're doing our part, right? It was received on this day, and then Mel has it, or Lee's depositing it and all that. We have an envelope system at the office where it says like, this is the earnest money, this is the binding date, this is the property information, this is the listing information. Check here to deposit now, or check here for further instructions, okay?
So the earnest money check is typically written out to Keller Williams Realty Consultants?
If you are on the buyer side, yes, more than likely, yes. Oftentimes, if you are on the seller side, you're going to be receiving the offer, and the buyer and their agent are generally going to dictate who holds the earnest money. Although it is negotiable, and I do believe that it's not usually something I push on. I believe I would probably push on other things to negotiate. But in a perfect world, yes, that we would hold all the earnest money. Okay. Now, I'm going to call the buyer to summarize the next steps. So you asked if there's a script for this. Not really. Although here are the main topics, right? You're basically letting them know all the things that you have done. So If, for example, you take a listing, it goes under contract right away, everything goes smoothly, and you see the seller at the appointment when they sign the paperwork, and the next time you see the seller is at the closing table and you walk away with 10 grand, they're like, damn, that dude's overpaid, right? So if they don't hear from you, if you're not telling them all the things you're doing along the way, they think you're overpaid. Okay, if you remind them of all the things that you do, they think you're underpaid, although they'd never admit it, right? So same thing with buyer. You want to make sure that the buyer knows that here are the things you can expect next. Okay, next we're going to book a home inspection. And then we're going to get the report, and if there's anything that you want to request that the seller fix, this is the mechanism of which we're going to do it. It's called an amendment to address concerns. Okay? The seller is under no obligation to fix anything, even if it's a code violation. It's all negotiated. Okay? So it's unlikely that you're going to get a 45-page inspection report with a handful of problems, and the seller is going to fix all of it. Right? So my recommendation is you pick the couple things that matter the most to you and let's ask them to fix that stuff. Okay? The seller may respond by flat out saying no. They may offer you money instead of fixing the stuff. They might offer to fix it. They may offer to fix some of it. This is another round of negotiation. And by the way, you're explaining these contingencies during the initial appointment, that buyer seminar, if you will, buyer presentation, so you don't oftentimes have to go back through this. So you'd say, okay, we're going to have a termite inspection, we're going to have a radon inspection, we're going to have a home inspection, right? And this is how it's going to play out. I'm well aware of our dates, our deadlines. So this is how it's going to work, right? You're always letting them know what to expect next. Okay. Then I'm calling the HOA. If there's an HOA, they've filled out a document called the Community Association Disclosure. So I'm calling the HOA and verifying that all that's true. Right, so that there's not any surprises at the end. I'm also obtaining the HOA docs. That is like the bylaws and rules and regulations of the community. Things like, okay, you can't have 4 dogs that live in the home, or you can't put up a fence, or you can't paint your shutters this color, or you can't re-roof your house this way, or you can't fly an Auburn flag, or whatever it is, right? So you want to make sure that the buyer is aware of all those rules and regulations so that they don't think they can rent a property and then later on they find out they can't. Okay. So you want to get the HOA docs and say, look, you're gonna have to follow all these rules when you own the place. So now's a good time to review all this. Okay. Termite inspection, radon inspection, any other inspections, maybe a septic tank inspection or a pool inspection, something of that nature. There's something called when the attorney gets a new file, they have 2 documents that they send out when they start the file. One is called a buyer information sheet and one is called a seller information sheet. This is essentially just stuff that they need, information they need of the 2 participants in the transaction, the buyer and seller, so that they can begin to do all their work, right? So basically what'll happen, it's like contact information, and if it's the seller information sheet, would have stuff like current mortgage and who's the mortgage with and what their telephone number is and that kind of stuff. So when the attorney is going to send you that file and basically say, hey, have your buyer fill this out or have your seller fill that out. That's what that document is. Follow that, Heather? That not to be confused with the other information sheet, which is basically for your benefit. Okay. So complete the buyer information sheet and send that back to the attorney. Then I'm going to call the lender again. I'm going to say, hey, congratulations, we got a file. What do you need? Any questions? How can I help? Right? Call the attorney. Hey, we got a new file together, guys. Here I am. I'm here to answer any questions. I'm willing to do anything I need to do to help make sure this thing closes. Right? If you need me for any reason, here's how to reach me. Hang on. Oh, you just tested me? You trying to make it even more complicated? Okay. Then we're going to negotiate repairs. Again, we want to set the client up for these expectations to make sure they know they're not going to get everything fixed, particularly in this market. Okay, a lot of times the inspector might say, oh my gosh, this is a double tap electrical outlet and that's, quote, against code. It doesn't really matter if it's against code. Everything is negotiated, okay? So do not set your client up to think that this deal is going to, this house is going to come perfect, okay? More than likely, they're going to have to spend a few bucks after the fact to do anything they want, right? Like the other day, I told you I bought a home last summer, and I was pretty much a horrible negotiator because we wanted that home at that time, and we bought it off market. And we went to turn the sprinkler or the water, the hose bib in the front of the house on, and it didn't work. And my wife's like, "Was that in the inspection report?" I'm like, "I don't know. I just wanted the house." Right? She's like, "Well, it doesn't work." I said, "Let's call somebody and fix it then." Right? I'm just moving straight ahead. You know what I'm saying? You're doing the right thing, Kim. Keep up the good work. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to negotiate repairs. I'm going to try to make it quick so we can all hop on bold, but we're going to update the Google Drive and DocuSign because now we have a new piece of the contract, right? Now we have an amended contract. So we need to get that into the DocuSign and Command and to our backup. Then we're going to order the appraisal. In a perfect world, we are able to negotiate all the repairs before we order the appraisal. What we do not want to happen, if we have the ability to do this based on your timing, is I don't want to send off a list of a bunch of stuff that I want the seller to fix for my buyer that I'm, kind of playing hardball on. Hey, we need you to service the HVAC system and apply a termite letter and fix this wood rod and replace this sink disposal or whatever. And then the next day, or an hour later, the seller gets a call that says, "Hey, a buyer just ordered the appraisal." Moving right along, right? If I get that call, I'm like, well, we were going to say yes to some of this stuff, but we're not now because they just dropped another $450 into the transaction. So they don't seem to be too upset about all these repairs. See what I'm saying? So it's a game, and there's a lot of psychology involved, right? So ideally, we wrap up the renegotiation after the repairs before we commit the money for the appraisal. Because if I can't get what I want fixed, I might not order an appraisal because I might leave the deal, right? So that's why the timing of all this is so critical, okay? So we're going to order the appraisal, we're going to schedule the closing, call up the seller and say, hey, or call up the attorney and say, hey, we got a closing on June 5th. What slots are available? They say, well, you can close at 10 a.m., 1 p.m., or 2 p.m. What do you do first? I know this is a little selfish, but what I do is I look at my own calendar because I control my own time. I say, oh, 1 o'clock's better because I got to pick up my kid at 2, or I got to do this for my wife at 3 or whatever. So I call my client and say, hey, can you close at 2? They're like, okay, done. Boom. Call the other client. Hey, I booked the closing. It's at 2 o'clock. Right? So the more you can control, the better off everything's going to be. Right? Then you're checking in with the lender. Hey, lender, everything going okay? Need any help? Right? You're dealing with the financing contingency. You're dealing with the appraisal contingency. You're checking the stipulations. Make sure nothing's slipping through the cracks. You order the home warranty. Or really what you do is you get a home warranty brochure from Kelly at 210 and you say, here's the brochure and here's Kelly's recommendation. Let me know when you're ready to order. And let me know what you want to order and I'll order it for you, okay? Then you confirm everything is straight with the files in Google Drive and DocuSign. And I had this on my list, although I never did it, I'll admit it. I didn't do it one single time, which was, my plan was to go around to like, let's say 20 or 30 of their new neighbors and say, here's a card. My client's buying that house over there on Thursday. And I just brought this card by. Maybe you want to sign it that says, welcome to the neighborhood. Oh, you're an agent? Yep, I'm an agent. Who do you know that wants to buy, sell, or invest in real estate that I can help today, right? Who's the agent that you work with when you have a closing need or real estate need, right? So that way I got a chance to meet some neighbors, was doing something highly unusual. No one has ever knocked on my door to do that, right? Although I never did it. But that idea is free. Okay, you can have that for free, guys. No one's laughing today. Come on. Come on. Brian, come on, smile for me, man. Okay. Clear to close. We want to make sure everything is closed. I think Georgia Natural Gas still does this. They used to have this thing that if you put the buyer's information, name and a mailing address into their online system, basically that would allow them to, if they registered for Georgia Natural Gas as their gas provider, they'd send you $25 gift card and then $50 gift card. They probably paid me $1,000 over time for all the referrals I sent to them. So if they have that program, you can look into it. And my assistant would always put that in. Then the final paperwork, go grab a closing gift, attend the closing, photo at closing. You know, so my assistant would be like, hey, Bill, you forgot to take the picture last time. Don't forget to take the picture, right? And then she'd know damn well that I would forget. And so she would send me another message on my way to the closing and say, Bill, don't forget. And she'd send me another message while I'm sitting at the closing and says, Bill, don't forget. You see what I'm saying? That's why it's so important to have another brain. Okay. Then I'd update the file, right? Make sure that everything is proper on the back end. Okay. That number, line 56, you can delete that. That's not really applicable anymore. There was this little glitch with eEdge, which was the system prior to command, that you had to do something funny to delete something. It's not really important anymore. Input anniversary calls into the calendar. So like I'd call them, I'd put a reminder to call them in like 3 days after the closing, a week after the closing, a month after the closing, and then a year after the closing. And then I call them every year on their anniversary. The purpose of that call was simply to make sure they're doing okay. Answer any questions they have. Post the pic to social media, write them a handwritten note, send them a survey, write a handwritten note to the co-op agent thanking them, give them ask for a written testimonial and a video testimonial, upload the testimonials to social media, move the file in Google Drive from active to closed, write a testimonial for the co-op agent. No one was, I wanted to recruit, right? So I was doing a few extra little things for the co-op agent that were nice. Add the co-op agent to my database, invite them for coffee, and then make the calls 1 week, 1 month, and 1 year afterwards. Okay. Do I have a script for the co-op agent stuff? No, I don't personally, but I can upload a, let me just make a note of that. Upload co-op. So there's a number of co-op scripts that you can use. And then Aubrey and Lee and I are in the process of creating a system that allows us to have a systematic way of communicating with the co-op agents to invite them in for training and that kind of stuff in an effort to help you grow your downline. Okay. All right. I know this was kind of super fast. So if you have any questions about this, please jot them down and I will answer them one by one. I am grateful for everyone that is here today. And I will upload this to the YouTube momentarily. Okay. You all have an awesome day. Be bold. Update your numbers. I'll see you soon.
Thanks, Bill.